All right, RJ. So this week on the Scouting Spotlight, it's more of a look at the Tampa Bay Lightning in general rather than one specific player, although we will only be highlighting two in depth. This week we're looking at both defenseman Cal Foote as well as forward Ondrej Palat. So RJ, why don't you give us a quick lowdown of why it is that we're looking at two separate players for Tampa Bay?
So, yeah, the reason we're looking at these two players this week for Tampa Bay is it looks like they're going to face a decision about maybe which one of them to keep and which one of them to protect. So ultimately, the Lightning are going to have to choose between that 7-3-1, seven forwards, three defensemen, and one goalie protection option, or the eight skaters and one goalie protection option. And it's going to come down to whether they want to protect Cal Foote as that fourth defenseman. And if they do, they're going to leave a lot of forwards exposed. And Ondrej Palat is certainly the most prominent of them right now, scoring numbers wise and everything. I mean, he's tied for the team lead in points, second in goals. So it might come down to which one, they feel more comfortable potentially losing, Palat or Foote. So that's why we're covering these two, because these are the two that I think that are going to drive that choice between what Tampa decides to do.
Mm-hmm. All right, so why don't we dive in and start talking, and if really the decision centers around whether or not they want to protect Cal Foote, their young defenseman, he's 22. Why don't we start by looking at him? RJ, what are the kinds of things you notice about Cal Foote, and why do you think Tampa might want him, or why should we want him as Kraken fans if they do expose him?
Well, I mean, the first thing to notice is you have to look at kind of the pedigree and the bloodlines, and I mean, hearing the name Foote, for those of us who were watching hockey, in like the early 2000s, late 90s, you think of Adam Foote, and this is Adam Foote's son. Adam Foote, great defenseman, played 20 years, two-time Stanley Cup winner. And he was known for his kind of big, rugged defensive style of play. And, he used his big body to, get people out from in front of the net. And, he was really known for that. And his style, happened to coincide really well with, that late 90s, early 2000s, pre-first lockout style of hockey. But Cal, on the other end, he has that similar size. He's actually bigger. He's 6'4", 227.
Yeah, he's huge.
He's a couple inches taller and a pound heavier even than his father was. But he uses that size in ways that kind of more suit the modern game. He's good at using that size to kind of close gaps on forwards and, using that long stick to get in passing lanes and, winning board battles as well. But he's a good puck mover. He's, can generate offense. And I mean, looking at him in juniors, with that size, I mean, he was like a cheat code on the blue line, especially on the power play. He's got a good shot. And, it seemed like he'd kind of walk in and do whatever he wanted in juniors, because you just don't see people with that kind of size very often. But, at the NHL level, it hasn't been quite the same yet. With this season with the Lightning, they've, kind of treated him with kid gloves a little bit. And one of the first things I noticed when watching him this season, or these last couple games, is, they're not really giving him a regular shift, with a regular D partner. It was kind of hard to find him almost. I would think, okay, here, his defensive pairing's coming on now, time to watch. And, they would have one of like Chernak or Sergachev or even Ruta out there instead of him. And they just kind of throw him whenever they felt that it wasn't too difficult to shift or too difficult to deployment. So they're still not really giving him the chance to kind of show what he can do. But of course, that means that, maybe he hasn't earned that chance yet. I guess what I did see from his play is he's working on being kind of solid defensively first. He's not trying to, drive play forward as much. I noticed a good play in the game against the Blackhawks, their last game, where it was this 2-on-1 kind of, and a player took it behind the net, and Foote, instead of puck watching, went and bodied up the guy in front of the net, who was open for the pass, and he probably prevented a goal there. So I think they're just trying to get his defensive instincts in line first, before letting him kind of be more creative as a player, in the way that he was in junior. I mean, he's got 1 goal, no assists through like 20 games. So he's not really producing offensively. But I think that's by design, with how they're utilizing him at this point. So what have you seen, Dylan?
So I've seen some of that same stuff. I think starting with his size, obviously he has great size. I think he needs to use it a little bit more. Like you talked about, he uses it in the sense that he has length and he has reach and he can close gaps better. But I do think that, yeah, he's starting just like in the last few games to body up guys in front of the net, but I think that's something he needs to do a lot more, right? He has the size to clear, especially against a smaller team like the Blackhawks, where they're going to have like Alex DeBrincat in front of the net. Like, there's no reason those guys should be anywhere close to the net when you have someone like Cal Foote out there. And he's just starting to put that kind of element to his game together. But for me, I'd want to see that a lot more. I also think that I think he's in his own head too much. I think it looks like to me when he's out there, particularly in his own zone, where I think they are trying to have him work on his game there, it looks like he's thinking too much when he's out there. Like, there are almost moments where you can like literally see a light bulb appear above his head and he's like, oh wait, I should be over there now. And it's like, and it's, you would hope that you're kind of past that by the time you're 22, right, in your development cycle. But it's hard to say how much of that is just because he's not seeing any ice time. He's getting 11 minutes a game right now. They're basically treating him the way a team might a seventh defenseman, even though he's the sixth defenseman. We talked a couple weeks ago about Jake Bean and him kind of being in that seventh defenseman role where he's not necessarily playing every night, but all that kind of stuff. But for Cal Foote, it's he's not really playing every night, even though he's dressed and he's sitting on the bench there. And I don't know how much of that is because they're unhappy with his play. Like, I don't know if there's something about what he's been doing in practices or behind the scenes that, they're just not comfortable giving him more minutes, or if it's strictly they're just in, look, we have to focus on being in a win now mode. We're in a super competitive division, especially at the top. I think that might have something to do with it. Tampa's in this situation where you really want to finish first in that division, because otherwise in the first round of the playoffs, you're going to have to play either Florida or Carolina. And I think for Tampa, it's a big deal to try to be first in that division so that they can avoid them until at least the second round of the playoffs. And so in order to do that, maybe that means you just, you start double shifting your more experienced guys that were around last year when you won the cup and stuff. I think when it comes to the stuff he was doing in Major Junior, back when he was in the WHL with Kelowna Rockets, I think there's some elements, again, of going back 2 weeks talking about Jake Bean, where, a lot of what he was doing in junior, you're right, he used his size. There was no way a 16 or a 17-year-old could body him off the puck, right? So he could just walk down into the slot, and he was just taking wrist shots from the slot, which, that's great to do in Major Junior, but you're not going to be able to do that in the NHL as a defenseman, unless you're like absolutely insanely skilled and you can guarantee that puck's going to go in vast majority of the time. And to this point, we haven't seen that, right? He's only got the one goal on the year. I don't know. I want to see him. Ultimately, I want to see him start excelling in at least one area of the game, offensively or defensively. Right now, he just looks like he's thinking too much in both areas. He seems to have better instincts offensively, as far as like he's really good at keeping pucks in the offensive zone. He's good about driving them down, getting them to the those great offensive stars that Tampa Bay has. But I haven't seen him, he's not trying to take shots really. He's averaging one shot a game. Now, again, he's only playing 11 minutes, but again, I would like to see a little bit more than that from him. Yeah, I don't know. I think he's like a poor man's version of Jake Bean in a lot of ways.
Really?
Yeah, I do. And I would much rather, as a Kraken fan, have someone like Jake Bean. I'm just not sold on Cal Foote right now, and I don't know that Tampa is, given the way they're playing him. And I think if they're not sold on him, I'm not sure why they would protect him.
I mean, how much of it do you think is, the case of it being, just any 22-year-old defenseman on a defending cup champion, that probably is going to be more, hesitant to play their guys, younger guys, especially on defense, give them a real role like that. I mean, one thing I did notice at the start of the season was that Foote would, kind of play a game, get 3 games off, play a game, get 2 games off. And at least now I think he just played his 15th straight game. So that he's been consistently in the lineup, and it's not like they have any, injuries there that they're dealing with, as far as I know, that would be the reason that he's in the lineup. I know that defensemen tend to develop a little later. So I wonder if, at 22, you're thinking it's already, maybe too late for him to kind of hit that potential.
Yeah, I think by 22 you should have at least a solid feel of who this player is. I hate to, this will be the last time I bring up Jake Bean, but Jake Bean was in a similar situation, right, where he's in Carolina, and even though he's a first round pick, he's just been stuck behind all of these amazing defensemen. And you could make kind of the same argument for Cal Foote. The difference is, I would say, is look at their AHL numbers. Last year Jake Bean won AHL Defenseman of the Year, and he way outpaced Cal Foote in just about every statistical category, offensively or defensively, if you look at metrics. Cal Foote, he dominated Major Junior, but that's really easy to do when you have his size. He struggled against the faster, higher hockey IQ opponents he was facing in the AHL. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't a dominant force. And I think by the time, you're talking about a former first round pick, by the time they're 22, you want to kind of see and have a feel of who they are. And, this, in the day and age of the salary cap, a lot of teams, when they're reigning Stanley Cup champions, you have pieces move out and you got to replace them with young guys. I think if they were seeing something from him, he would be playing, at least 15 minutes a night. I mean, I can't remember the last time I've seen a defenseman only average 11 minutes a night. Can you? That's
be like a D type they don't trust.
Yeah, that's shockingly low. And to be doing that as a team on a condensed schedule, that to me speaks volumes about what their feeling towards him is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Cal Foote. If they decide not to protect Cal Foote, which is something I would be doing if I was them, is I would go ahead and I would expose Cal Foote to protect forwards, particularly a guy like Ondrej Palat. So, RJ, what are your thoughts on Palat and how he's been playing this year?
So Palat has been, I mean, if you look at just the raw numbers, I mean, you have to wonder, what's going on with him this season. He's got, I think 27 points in 29 games. He's scoring at, a much higher rate than he had been, at any point in the past. And, he turns 30 this season. So, it's not like you'd expect him to be getting a lot better, aging curve wise. So it does beg the question, why the increased numbers? And, I don't think you have to look too far into it to kind of see where the difference is being made. And that's on the power play. I mean, he has more points on the power play than he has at even strength this year. He's got 7 goals, 8 assists, 15 points on the power play. And he's got 4 goals, 8 assists, and 12 points at even strength this season. And, that's not necessarily, a knock on him too much, but you see that he's found this specialized role on the power play this season off of those right side boards. They're stationing him, on those right boards, opposite Steven Stamkos. And it works really well because the opposition has to respect Stamkos. You have to prevent that one-timer on the left side boards because that's the most dangerous weapon they have on the power play. And so what that's doing is it's opening up a lot of time and space for Palat to have that puck, to work with it and ultimately to shoot from those right side boards. And a player like him who's got a really good shot, he can fit the puck into some tight windows. He's been able to take advantage of that this season. So I think that's really where those extra numbers are coming from. At even strength, I think he's still kind of that, 40-point player that we've previously thought he was, that we've seen in all these other seasons. And for me, that's not really a can't miss kind of thing. I think it's just, you can find those players. The Kraken aren't going to have, a Steven Stamkos they can line up on the left side of the power play to give Palat that kind of time and space. And I think if you try and, run a power play unit through him, it's not necessarily going to have the same results if you don't have that same supporting cast.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, personally, I think the Kraken would be better off going in a different direction, especially with cap space as valuable as it is. So I would hope that, that maybe you're right and that they do choose to protect Palat in the forwards rather than Cal Foote.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
I think so. I agree with you that the power play time that he's been seeing this season is the difference that we're seeing in his traditional scoring metrics. I will say the other thing I've noticed from him this year versus previous seasons is I think he's slowed down a little bit as he's getting older, and I think he's adjusted his game to that. And I think he's playing a style of game that is it's more suited to certain aspects of today's game. As crazy as that is to say, as the game is faster than ever and everybody's more speed based than ever, but he's always been an excellent passer. And one of the things I noticed watching him game in game out is he makes these incredibly long breakout passes to guys, right? Like he'll get the puck in his own zone, and like a defenseman, he'll just send it completely all the way through the neutral zone, and he'll hit a guy in stride to go in on a breakaway or on a one-on-one. And I think that's where you're seeing an uptick in his assist numbers is by doing stuff like that. Instead of being like, okay, I'm going to lead the charge, he's like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to hit this guy for a breakout pass, and that'll be better for us. The other thing I'm noticing is, particularly at even strength, not so much on the power play, he's playing in front of the net a lot more. Like it's interesting to watch their zone entries with him, because when they do, he will often switch places with the center and he'll go straight to the front of the net. And he's not a small guy. He's 6 foot, 188 pounds, but he's built in a way that allows him to utilize his lower body strength, so he's able to really plant himself in front of the net and be there and gather rebounds or screen a goalie. And I think that's been making a big difference for him and for Tampa as a team when he's out there. That's something that I do think Seattle needs to pay attention to, because the last expansion team, Vegas, that's been the virtually the only area of struggle for them has been in rebounds offensively. One of the things I saw this incredible deep dive, I don't have it in front of me, but it was about Shea Theodore and why the Golden Knights score less when Shea Theodore's out there, even though he drives possession metrics better than a lot of defensemen. And the conclusion they came to is Vegas is by far and away the worst team when it comes to being able to tip pucks or put in rebounds, and that's because none of their players are built to have a net front presence. And I think particularly as you get into playoff time in today's NHL, that still means a ton, even with all the speed and all that stuff. If you don't have a net front presence, you're not going to score as many goals in the NHL, and that's just the way it's been for a while, and I don't see that changing. So I think a guy like Palat, who has understood that as he's getting older, he's slowing down, and as the game is getting faster around him, he's not, as fast, and he can't play a strict speed-based brand of hockey anymore. I think having someone who understands that, who's working on that other aspect of their game, who can teach younger players about the little nuances of what it means to play in front of the net, I think that would be very valuable for the Kraken. I'm not worried about the cap space. He'll only have a year left on his contract after this, so it's not that big a deal. And realistically, it's not like the Kraken are going to be taking a ton of high-priced guys just based on who's going to be available to them. So I'm not worried if Palat's available. I don't think the financials will be an issue for the Kraken, but I think the leadership he can bring and the skill set he brings, particularly in a year one where you're going to be dealing with a lot of young defensemen, they're going to be just throwing a lot of pucks towards the front of the net. I think having a guy like Palat who has that experience will be very beneficial for them.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's a good point as far as how he's learned to play in front of the net and learned to adapt when being a little slower. It makes me think of a guy like Joe Pavelski, who's never been particularly fast, but
Right.
you can see it even this season at 37, 36, that he's able to rack up points by playing that style of game that still, with all the speed in today's NHL, just works because you don't have a lot of guys who are necessarily willing to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we see it all over the place. Joe Thornton in Toronto is doing that. He's never done that before, but he's doing it now, and all of a sudden his numbers are resurging. Or we were talking the other day, Evgeny Malkin's starting to do that. I look at a guy
Right.
like Malkin, he's 34 now, and it looks like he's adjusted his game to know that he's not, as fast as he used to be, but he's still big, and they're using their hockey smarts. All these guys are really smart hockey players, and they know where to be, when to be there. And so they just have to adjust for the fact that they can't get there as quickly anymore, right?
Right.
So, but yeah, I just think it's something that a younger developing team, it's nice to have a couple veteran presences, and it's nice to have guys that play different brands of hockey, so that you know if the Kraken are taking guys that are borderline, are they going to be NHLers for a decent amount of time? Maybe a couple of them make the transition to play more like that, and that's what secures them a spot on the roster.
Yeah.
So RJ, so obviously you feel like they should be, if you're Tampa, you should protect Cal Foote and you should leave a couple of these forwards exposed. I feel very much the opposite, because I think for Tampa, your window is now, so go ahead and keep some slightly older guys that are proven in the playoffs and all that stuff, and try to win as many cups as you can while you can. Um, Ultimately, I mean, do you think Palat's really the only forward that, if they were to protect Cal Foote, do you think Palat's really the only forward? I mean, I know we're focusing on him because he's played the best this year for sure, but why don't we just quickly throw out a couple other names that might be available to the Kraken? We won't go as in depth on any of them, but who else do you think would be available if they do protect Cal Foote?
Well, if they do protect Cal Foote, it'd be the four protected would be Stamkos, Point, Sorelli, and Kucherov. So everyone except them. So that would leave, it would leave Alex Killorn, it would leave Palat, it would leave Matthew Joseph, Yanni Gord, plus some of the younger guys that really haven't gotten as much of a run at the NHL level. Alex Barre-Boulet, Taylor Radish, some of those guys, if the Kraken see someone they like. A lot of second-round picks,
Mm-hmm.
Volkov, that a lot of second-round picks that, because Tampa's so talented, haven't really gotten into the lineup regularly. But you never know. You can have another star coming out of that group. Tampa's drafted so well. You
Yeah.
got to think at least one of those guys is going to be a top six forward.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I think more so than just about any other team, Tampa's got the toughest decisions to make as far as protections go. And so far, obviously they're not exactly tipping their hat, or, giving us any clues as to what it is that they're going to be doing. So it'll be interesting to watch and see what they do, but that's at least our 2 cents on what we think Tampa will be doing, and also what we hope for Seattle, the best case scenario for them.